Joining me now, Ian Lee of Carleton University's Sprott School of Business. He is back from a sojourn in Poland for a while. Welcome home. Indeed. And in Toronto, Erin Weir is the economist with the United Steelworkers. Thanks for being here, Erin Weir. All right, Ian Lee, what's your take on this? Is this a failure or a success? How do you rate the government's telecom policy?
It is a failure thus far. There can be no doubt about that. And I say that because empirically, the goal was to open this up to more competition. So now, after a year or two of talking about this, do we have more competition? Do we have another large player to make this industry more competitive? And the answer is very clearly no. I think the government's heart is in the right place. That is to say, their goal to have a more competitive telecom market. Their problem is in the execution. They will not accept their own advice, which was from Compete to Win, the 2008 Blue Ribbon panel, that concretely, specifically recommended opening telecom up to foreign competition. And just very quickly, Evan, a contradiction is embedded in the Telecommunications Act of Parliament of Canada. Section 7, anyone at home can look it up. Section 7 talks the mandate. And I think it's Section 7C says the mandate is to have a competitive, efficient telecom market. Very next section says, and it must be Canadian owned. You cannot be half pregnant. You cannot say we're going to have a competitive market, and by the way, we won't let foreign competition in to make it competitive. You can't have A and B. It must be A or B. If we're going to have Canadian, we're going to have a restricted market and not allow foreign competition in, we are not going to have a competitive market. We're going to have the telecom cartel that we have now that milks and plucks 35 million Canadians by driving up the prices, which they can get away with because there's no competition.
Telecommunications is a natural monopoly industry. It's very expensive to build the network, but once that infrastructure is in place, it's very cheap to add additional customers to the network. There's very few regions in Canada where it would be economical to have multiple overlapping networks competing with each other. So if you really did leave this industry to the market, what it would tend to do is entrench one monopoly telephone provider in most regions. It's for that reason that historically governments have approached this sector as a public utility, either by regulating a private company quite directly or by having a crown corporation provide telecom services. And I think that's actually the way to go. What we've seen with recent events is this attempt to kind of rig the market in favor of competition isn't working. We've had the CRTC mandate that phone companies be allowed to use each other's networks. We've had these spectrum auctions.
Are you calling for a crown corporation to run telecom?
Well, you already have that in the province of Saskatchewan. It works very well.
SaskTel.
And despite having a very right-wing provincial government there for several years, they've kept it as a crown corporation. In fact, they campaigned on keeping SaskTel as a crown corporation. So that's one good model. Another viable model is to say we recognize that it's going to be a private company that has a lot of market power, so we will very directly regulate it in the interests of consumers.
Comrade Weir, I want to refute I feel like Dr. Johnson, who went to Bishop Berkeley, who had denied the existence of reality, and kicked him in the shins and said, I refute thee thus. Erin, I just got back from Poland. You said it's a natural monopoly, only one or two can survive. There are dozens of mobile phone companies in Poland. They've opened it up. Everybody's there. Francis Orange is there. T-Mobile is there. Every man and his dog is there, and they're all competing it up and mixing it up. You know, if you want competition, you've got to open up the market. The idea that it's a natural monopoly has been refuted by reality.
But hang on. In a country like Canada, with our geographic distances, can you have true competition, or would you fundamentally underserve rural and northern areas?
There is, and I don't dispute the idea, what you're really invoking is the idea of market failure in small communities, but that's intrinsic in small remote communities because the market just isn't big enough. That's just as true for postal services as it is for education and hospitals.
Then once you do that, though, then you admit the government has a role regulating, and so the question is, at what level?
I never said, when I'm arguing opening up to foreign competition, I didn't say the government just walks away and abandons the market. They still are the referee of the hockey game. In other words, the referee of the hockey game doesn't choose winners and losers and say, you know, I'm going to call more penalties against the Ottawa Senators because I want to help the Toronto Maple Leafs because they're so hopeless. I'm going to, you know, call penalties against to try and favor and help the Maple Leafs win. The referee must be completely neutral and make sure the rules are enforced by everybody. And that's what we need. That does not mean deregulation. It does not mean the government walks away. And yes, the market can support multiple players.
Erin, what about that? The government regulates requirements, and whoever can meet them, whether they're Canadian or foreign,
exactly,
go for it.
Well, I'm glad to hear Ian concede that the government needs to intervene very much in this industry in order to even create a competitive market, because if you truly did open it up, it would tend to lead to a monopoly, and allowing that to be a foreign-owned monopoly wouldn't make it any better. So I think the question is really how you best regulate the industry in the interests of consumers, and I think that rather than trying to kind of shoehorn additional competitors in by, rigging the spectrum auction in favor of new entrants,
I'm not arguing that.
a much better policy would be to actually regulate the prices that these telephone companies charge, to mandate that they provide some kind of basic bundle of services
but
at
Aaron,
a reasonable cost.
are you arguing, as some might say, are you arguing for price control? Are you talking about government control and price control, or should competition regulate price?
Precisely.
Well, I think in most industries, we would say competition should regulate the prices. In an industry like telecommunications, which is a network industry, which is not very conducive to a perfectly competitive market, then I think government does have to step in with regulation, or to say we recognize we can't have a competitive market here, so we're going to have a crown corporation, which would certainly be a very viable way of providing a fourth major telecom company in all regions of Canada if the government were really committed to doing that.
I got 30 seconds.
Okay, I think Erin is the only other person now who has joined Linda McQuaig saying let's go back to 1918 or the 1930s and go for government nationalization at Telecom. There's no serious person advocating that. Very quickly, yes, you can regulate in the following sense. Erin says it's a natural monopoly. If you can say, for example, that you, the Bell Canada carrier, or TELUS Rogers, you must share your network with the startups who are coming in, the new entrants, and then you regulate so they don't charge prices that are outrageous. You can regulate that sort of thing. Regulate access so the incumbents can piggyback on the network. By the way, those rules were already in effect. And then that's how you can regulate the parameters while still bringing in foreign competition and driving down prices.
All right, unfortunately, I've got to regulate the conversation. Erin Weir, Ian Lee, I got to leave it there. Thanks for always good to have you on the money.
Thanks.